Welcome back, YouTube. This is the Practical Kabbalah channel. And now we have to start our explanation, explaining things practically, not in an abstract, highfalutin way you can't really relate to, not in a way where you get a bill in the mail, not in a way where I appear with some sort of like, I don't know, bed sheets and turbans and like all sorts of weird jewelry or whatever. It's in a simple, practical way you could derive value in your day-to-day life, right? So I want to give you some background information, God willing, beginning with the understanding that what we're looking at in the case of the analogy, which is kind of my side of the explanation. Then, like I mentioned in the previous YouTube, excuse me, please, God willing, Benjamin, one of my mentors, will explain to us the analog. God's relationship with us is the understanding in Kabbalah and Chassidus is that our essence is a singularity. What do I mean by a singularity? I mean, it's not made of parts. For example, the computer I'm recording on here, we could describe as one computer, but the reality of the matter is that it's made up of parts. It's got a keyboard component, it's got this little trackpad for the mouse, it's got a LCD screen for the monitor, right? And so on and so forth. Those are maybe some of the external parts I see. They're internal parts like the motherboard, CPU, RAM, hard drive, whatever, right? When we say that God is one, what we actually mean is only God exists. Okay. They say, well, what are you talking about? Here I am having a conversation with you. Here's my computer. Here's the desk it's on. What do you mean only God exists? So it's explained in Kabbalah and Chassidus that what we're looking at in the form of creation, like Benjamin told me, I like the way he phrased it a lot, is an increasingly particular manifestation of God's oneness, right? So to speak, by way of crude analogy, if you have a book like Harry Potter, yeah, there's like a scenery and a time that the story takes place and all sorts of characters who have like very diverse capabilities and attributes relative to each other and a whole storyline. But what we're really looking at is a particular manifestation of the creative capacity of the author, right? Not actual characters that have any existence separate and apart from their author. So, just to give again, it's a gross oversimplification, but just, I'll throw that out there. Okay. So when we say 10 spheros, this is a very important clarification we need to make, God willing. Okay, because a lot of times I would hear lectures or read a book where authors would describe the 10 spheros as 10 quote unquote powers. And it used to make me think as a kid, like I would imagine like glowing balls of light floating within myself. And I'm kind of like controlling these, powers. Obviously, that was a bunch of baloney. It's not like there's anything floating around in us and we just can't see it because it's made of ethereal material like Casper the Friendly Ghost or something like that. That's it doesn't work that way. What we're really describing is 10 general capabilities for self-expression. So we don't have to express ourselves. We could go take a nap or go to sleep, right? But let's say we do want to express ourselves. Like right now, I'm expressing myself to you. And I'm making use of, just broadly speaking, like I guess I would say the dominant mode of self-expression is I'm in teaching mode, thank God, right? And that would map to what they call the sphera of Yesod, of communication, right? So the word sphera comes from the word sapir, which means to shine, right? When we shine light, what's the effect of that? We become aware of the reality of what's around us. Like right now, I'm surrounded by multiple sources of light. I have like a lamp to my left over here. I have a lamp in the back, a lamp to my right. I'm a big fan of the light, right? When we turn the lights on, we become aware of the reality of the room. So a person won't trip over their model airplane or bump into a door or whatever. So in a similar fashion, when we talk about our decision, because we have the God-given capacity for self-expression, when we choose to express ourselves, the Kabbalists refer to that expression of self metaphorically using terminology like related to light. Like sphera comes from sapir, which means shining, right? Like when we think of shining, you can think of that in many contexts, but a lot of times what comes to mind is shining light, right? And there are 10 spheros. But the truth is, even though their number is 10, you could combine them in different ways to produce almost infinite diversity. Like Benjamin used to teach me, you could have a finite number, really small number of colors in an artist palette, or like a base 10 in math, like 10 digits, like 1 through 10, um, or a limited number of musical notes, but the diversity of genres in music and in art are so great. You could have like a classic style, a postmodern style, of this style, of that style, and we're very colorful in the way that we express ourselves, right? Even though we only have 10 spheros. And later in the book of Shar HaYichud, the Gate of Unity, again available for a free download in English and Hebrew, in English and Hebrew. I tend to like the PDF, which has English and Hebrew, from neirot.com, neirot.com. I don't get paid anything from the ones who put that up. They're actually mentors of mine. And I use their materials totally free and it's high quality. So why not? It's not like I get anything out of it, in terms of like affiliate marketing or some baloney like that. I don't. And actually, their books are available for free. You could pay for them if you want to, but I mean, I just downloaded the PDF and it is what it is. That's what I use like for audio recordings and such at this time. Anyways, later in the book, the author of the book talks about different types of like relationships between the spheros. And many times you'll see that depicted in these seemingly cryptic looking Kabbalistic like drawings and stuff like that. God willing, we'll get to that. Okay, and some of the relationships between them. Actually, maybe even now we'll talk a little bit about that, just so you can see how that works simply. But let's talk about the spheros. Okay, an order of operation in self-expressions, beginning with the conscious layer of self-expression, we have Keter, which translates to crown. Okay, but one thing you notice about a crown, like what's the purpose of that metaphor? A crown sits on top of your head, right? Inside your head are the hemispheres of your brain, which are the vehicle for the expression of your soul's intellectual capabilities, right? So if you think, if the crown is on top of the head, what faculty or mode of self-expression could that represent? What is supra-rational? And it really breaks down into two sides of one coin. What I mean by that is either you get both or you get neither. And they're personal preferences and ambition. They call that in Hebrew, personal preferences as tainug, pleasure, and ambition or will is ratzon. And there are two sides of the same coin because we enjoy what we want, what we have a desire for. Instead of will, or ambition, you could say desire. So we have a desire for things we have pleasure in, and we have pleasure in things that we desire. So it's kind of two sides of the same coin. But the truth of the matter is, if you look more granularly, many times the Kabbalists will say that that tainug, that pleasure, is higher than desire. And what we mean by higher is pleasure or personal preferences, as the name implies, is something that relates to ourself and not to anything or anyone outside of ourselves. By contrast, when it comes to desire, a desire for a person, a place, a thing, an activity, whatever, outside the self, we want, because we believe, whether we're correct or incorrect in that belief, we believe that thing will allow us to experience what we enjoy. Like, for example, let's say we have a pleasure in winning and we're very competitive. If someone says, do you want to play basketball? Yes. Do you want a spelling bee? Yes. Do you want to play this fighting game in Nintendo against me? Yes. Why do we say yes to all those activities? We have a desire for those activities because they function as opportunity vehicles for experiencing our pleasure in winning, just in different contexts. Does that make sense? So again, in a sense, you could say pleasure is higher relative to desire, but the truth of the matter is they both, either you have them both or they're not there, right? Then we have like the intellectual capabilities. And in general, that breaks down to chachma, which people translate wisdom, but it's really like our God-given creative capacity. And it relates to, the word chachma can be broken down into two words, koach ma, the power of transparency. And usually what we're transparent to is what we're awed by, and what we're awed by is when we view something as larger than life. Like maybe you're a science student in school, and Einstein already passed away, but let's say it was during his lifetime, and he walked in through the door, and you're like, whoa, This is like someone you perceive as a larger than life personality. Or let's say that you're standing in front of the Grand Canyon and you're like, wow, this thing is so big. And I'm like this little person, right? Maybe you're in a flight in an airplane and you look down at the planet Earth and you're like, wow, it looks so small and these other things look so big, right? You're by this big cloud or whatever, right? Or maybe you're an astronaut and you're like, wow, look at how big some of these planets are, right? So basically, as we gain insight into some subject or something we're studying, of course, the more we learn about something that we're into, the happier we'll be that we're like learning and growing in our understanding of that subject. But at the same time, and really to the extent that we learn, that we understand more, we begin gaining insight into how little we understand. We're kind of overawed by how wondrous this thing is and how distant a true understanding of the essence of the thing we're studying is from our understanding. The thing that we're studying. I don't know if I maybe said understanding by accident. Sorry about that if I did. I don't want to confuse you, God forbid. So that's kind of like our God-given creative capacity, Chachma. Then there's Bina. Oh, and I just wanted to say, sorry, about Keter. What we're into, like our personal preferences and our ambitions are supra-rational, right? Like if I say, I like chocolate, you're like, well, I think vanilla is the best flavor, not chocolate. Whatever, is it based on a reason? No, that's just my thing. If I say, I'm super into classic cars, and you're like, classic cars, they're junk. You gotta get with the times, and these new modern smart cars, they're so cool. Why am I into classic stuff and you're into like more modern stuff? That's just our preferences, right? That it's not based on a reason. That's super rational. Same thing, like I really want this thing. Like I really want this. Well, you really want that other thing. Why is that? Because I want this and you want that, right? So I'm sorry, I forgot to make the connection for you. Just like a crown is on top of the head that houses the brains that are the tools for the expression of the soul's intellectual capabilities, for which reason the crown or keter makes for a good metaphor to describe the supra-rational. Sorry, I forgot to close the loop on that thought earlier. Chachma, our God-given creative capacity, and we usually think of it as like, insight, creativity, looking at things like broadly, in contrast to the next mental faculty, which is Bina, analysis. That's more looking at things in a detailed, concrete way, not in a holistic, abstract way. And that seems, if I'm understanding correctly, like Bina might be related to the word binyan or bona, which means building things, which obviously means like taking parts and combining them, right? So in contrast to Chachma and the more creative, holistic approach and abstraction and maybe pattern recognition and stuff like that, we also have the God-given capability to break things down into their component parts and more concrete type thinking, right? And really included in that, which is an argument the author makes, is applied understanding, okay? Then we also have the faculty of da'as, the third mental faculty, which people translate concentration, but that's only true at the base layer. It's actually much deeper than that. It actually refers to our ability to appreciate something essentially, how it transcends form in either of those expressions of Chachma and Bina. And we really get into the understanding something essentially in the core of the matter through through those two approaches of looking at this thing at a high level, Chachma, and then going through the deep dive in a detailed way of Bina. And then we get to the core of the matter that transcends expression in any of those two forms, like Benjamin would explain to me, like looking at something from a material standpoint, more concretely looking at something more abstractly from a spiritual standpoint, Chachma, and then really understanding that really the point is not really how God is relating to us in the form of physical things or even spiritual things. People many times think the physical is not the goal, the spiritual is. They're actually incorrect. It's not. Neither the physical nor the spiritual is an end in and of itself or has any existence, let alone any value in isolated terms. Both are expressions of essence and God's oneness in their own unique ways. But it's only through uniting both and engaging both in the way that God instructs us to in the information he revealed in the form of the Torah and the instructions he gave to Moshe, our teacher, peace be upon him, which was a program not only for us personally in the form of the Torah, but really for all nations and what they call the 7 laws of Noah, the 7 Noahide laws. It's not a literal 7 laws, it's 7 categories that encompass many details. If I were asked to guess where you could find that information online for free, probably asknoah.org or something like that, if I recall correctly. Yeah, so that's kind of like, maybe think of a judge in a court case, like a defense is going to kind of paint the big picture and move to acquit. The prosecution is going to say, pay attention to the details and move to throw the book at the guy. And Das is kind of like the judge who has to arbitrate between those perspectives and take both into account. Another way to understand Das is, like my friend Shimon told me, personal interest. That's another way you could think of that. When we feel ourselves to be kind of we view this as of essential or pivotal personal importance and value, which is how I view this information, frankly, which is why I'm doing this YouTube and trying to build this community to share it with people, for one. And I'm thankful to God for that view of it, which I believe to be an accurate view. So those are kind of like the intellectual or the psychological layer of self-expression. Now let's talk a little bit about the emotional layer of self-expression. Then we'll go to the instinctual and then the behavioral. So kind of at the emotional layer, we have the 3 primary emotions of chesed, gevura, and tiferes. Chesed is kindness. And I think it might relate to the word, oh, sorry, I should have said da'as. Da'as is related to the word dalit ayin, da, like, which means to know. But it means to know in an intimate way, in a very personal way. And you see that in the book of Genesis, where it describes the relationship between Adam and Eve. And it says that Adam, which is, Adam, da et Chava, he knew Eve, and then it says she conceived and had kids. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out, what the reference is to, what would produce children. And again, that's kind of like a very intimate way of knowing. So again, like we said, from my friend Shimon, viewing something as personally relevant and very important and making this deep mental connection to this person, this place, this thing, this activity, whatever it may be. Chesed, they translate as kindness, and I think it might relate to the word chas, which means like to have kindness towards someone. And it would correspond to like kindness and love. And I'm trying to think out with you. And I'm thinking this through as I'm speaking it out. I'm doing this ad hoc. I have no notes in front of me. I'm just speaking from the heart here and trying to share this information with you. Some people might call it attraction. Some people might call it love or kindness, right? Then you have the opposite of that, gvura, which is restraint or strictness. In contrast to the kind of conceptual direction, when we think kindness, we think going out towards someone. When we think gvura, we think more, like I said, like self-restraint, and also maybe kind of, instead of extroversion, introversion in terms of the emotional responses. And like I called it, conceptual direction, like how we relate, choosing to relate to others. And then kind of synthesizing the emotions of love and fear, or attraction and repulsion, or however you want to phrase it there, right? Loving kindness or sternness, whatever, is tiferet. Oh, I should have said the connection to the language. Sorry about that. So in terms of like etymology, maybe a possible connection, just thinking it out with you, is like gevura relates to gibor, a warrior. What's really the hallmark of someone who's like a warrior? It says in Ethics of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot, Ezehu Gibor, who is someone who's mighty, Hakovesh et Yitzro, someone who subdues their inclination. So they have that power of self-restraint. Look, let's be honest, when we get frustrated, the power to restrain ourselves and not say what we're thinking or acting on what we're thinking about doing, like, that definitely is a very great form of self-restraint and an exercise of personal power. I mean, you can't really deny that, right? And then what synthesizes the two like opposite emotional states of kindness and strictness is tiferet, beauty. And like Benjamin explained to me, the reason why it's called beauty is because what we find beautiful is a synthesis of opposites, like sweet and sour chicken in the context of taste, or different musical notes kind of combining together in intricate ways that we find super attractive. Different colors and how they mesh in different designs on some building or car or clothing or whatever. And why is that? Why do we find that synthesis of opposites so beautiful? So like Benjamin explained to me, because like we were saying about the synthesis of the two opposite perspectives of Chachma and Bina in the form of Das, when we can synthesize opposite perspectives or opposite feelings, what's really demonstrated is, even though it looks like two opposite perspectives or two opposite feelings, that, by the way, tend to flow forth from those perspectives, right? So if we look at someone on the whole, the tendency is to feel positively towards them, chesed. And when we like look at someone in a very detailed way and kind of nitpick, the tendency is to feel like maybe a little bit more kind of keep our distance from them, because typically we'll find something we might not like or whatever. Um, and again, the Middle Rebbe talks about, I'm sorry, the author of our book is Rabbi Dov Ber of Lubavitch, may his merit protect us, who they call the Middle Rebbe, based on his placement in a line of Hasidic grandmasters. And he's actually the son of the founder of the Chabad Hasidic movement, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. May their merits protect us, of righteous memory. I should have mentioned that earlier. The Middle Rebbe later in this book goes through like different types of relationships between the spheros. So I'm just kind of drawing on that at a much higher level here, right? About the tendency. In contrast, the relationship between those modes of self-expression that deal in the domain of synthesizing opposites, one thing follows from another, not by tendency, but by necessity. Because, for example, you could have a case where looking at someone on the whole gives rise to a strictness. Like maybe someone joins your company, they're doing great for the first 2 weeks, but then HR calls you and they're like, hey, we noticed something about their work history. They never worked in more than one place for more than 3 months at a time. And you're like, wait a minute, like there's a broad pattern emerging here. Like, uh-oh, this isn't good, right? That's like an emotional response of strictness, right? Or, for example, you could go through the detailed analysis of some individual who is legitimately like a saint. And the more details you learn about their life, the more it creates a feeling of love that you have in your heart towards that person. Whether they're, with us today or whether they passed away 100 years ago. So on the contrary, the more you do the deep dive, the more you're like, wow, this person is so amazing. I had no idea. Wow, right? You feel so positively towards them. So again, by contrast, if you have a deep inner appreciation for the individual, essentially in the perspective of Das, necessarily you'll have empathy towards them. That's another way you can look at Tiferet, beauty. You could call it beauty, you could call it empathy, you could call it mercy. There are like a lot of synonyms you could use for that, right? Now let's, again, in order of operations, we've gone from our personal preferences. Let's say, for example, your preference is for kindness, and your ambition is for kindness. And you tend to look at people on the whole as good people and feel positively towards them, right? Now we have to kind of move forward in our order of operations and our self-expression to the instinctual, or what I would call the logistical layer of Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Netzach means victory. Hod means submission. Yesod means communication or connection. So Netzach, victory, means like our God-given capacity to overcome obstacles. Let's say I view you as a good person on the whole. I feel positively towards you emotionally, and I want to help you out. Well, there might be a series of obstacles that stand in the way of me doing that. Let's say I want to lend you $100, but I have $20 in my wallet. Okay, so I have to go to an ATM and withdraw $100. Let's say I have the $100 in my wallet, but you're across the street and it's a red light. Okay, maybe I have to wait till there's a green light and no cars to go across the street and give you the $100. Let's say I want to share this information with you, which I do, but you're not here in this room with me. Okay, maybe I have to do a YouTube, recording or something like that, right? And that's kind of like the idea of victory, of like, what are the obstacles that we need to overcome to bring this kindness or whatever we want to, however we want to express ourselves, to actualization. Okay. Hod means submission, like my desire to give up my desire in favor of your desire. Well, why would I do that? There could be a variety of reasons. Let's say you're a subject matter expert in fixing computers, and my friend has a computer that needs fixing. I'm not going to just try to make it up as I go along and fix it for him. I'd rather call you. You're the subject matter expert, right? Like that's where you'll hear someone say, I'm the parent, you're the child, I'm the teacher, you're the student, and I'm the 3-star general, and they pull rank. What are they trying to do? They're trying to like motivate you to give up your desire in favor of the way they want to do things, right? Like I'm the boss around here or whatever, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying like that's the idea of submission. Like let's say, for example, to the force of authority, but that might make sense in the area of subject matter expertise if you trust the integrity of the person, advising you or whatever, right? Maybe you're even paying them to advise you or whatever. Then Yesod, which literally translates to foundation, but it's really the foundational relationship, and more broadly, like our God-given capacity for communication and connection, right? And these are, again, kind of like the logistical level considerations about like bringing to bear the emotions, and behind it, like the perspectives, and behind it, the ambitions, and behind it, like our personal preferences and the things we enjoy. And then finally is our God-given capacity for external expression, which is called Malchus. Malchus literally translates to kingship, but the purpose of the metaphor is it calls to mind a king who is capable of externally expressing his will, and that's literally in people external to himself, like his servants. Like maybe he wakes up in the morning and he says, "I don't like this light; it's blocking my view. I want to see the trees in this forest outside my window. I don't like that thing. Make that mountain go away." And his servants say, "Yes, Your Majesty, your wish is our command." And they go out there with pickaxes and shovels and all this other stuff, and they go dismantle the mountain. So he has a capability to express his will external to himself. Well, we have a God-given capacity to express ourselves externally. For example, in the form of speech, for example, in the form of behavior. We could use speech to externally express what we're into. We could share with people, hey, these are the things that interest me. Hey, this is what my goals are. Hey, this is how I view things. Hey, this is how I feel. Hey, this is how I think I'm going to go about overcoming that obstacle to achieve that goal, right? So we could kind of take all these prior conceptual states and express them externally with our God-given faculty of external expression, metaphorically called kingship or malchus. And that's kind of like many times you'll see like a direct connection. So that kind of like explains some of the different tendencies. Oh, I should have been more explicit with you. So remember how we said there are tendencies and necessities, right? So in terms of the relationship between spheros, so Netzach is in the line of like Chachma, Chesed, Netzach, in contrast to, let's say, Bina, Gvur, and Hod. So for example, if we view someone on the person, a place, a thing, an activity on the whole Chachma, that tends to give rise to the emotional response of Chesed, of loving kindness, and the desire to overcome obstacles, just logistically speaking, in Netzach, in order to express that kindness to, let's say, that person, for example. In contrast, we could have like a more detailed view, Bina, analysis, that tends to give rise to Gvura, strictness, that tends to give rise to Hod, and we pull rank and we say, hey, I'm the teacher, you're the student, just do this. I'm the boss, you're the employee, well, this is what we're going to do, and you don't have to like it, kind of thing, or whatever, right? But that middle line, like we said, that really synthesizes those opposite states and demonstrates the individuality, the essence, the freedom of expression is dot tiferet yesod, the ability to establish an essential connection, let's say, for example, to a person. But we know between me and you, it could be a place, a thing, an activity, right? An essential connection intellectually, das, emotionally, tiferet, and externally, yesod, right? Like usually when you think of yesod, you think of like, a couple, or you think of a service provider and a customer, you think of a teacher and a student, a boss and an employee, whatever, right? There's a kind of relationship or dynamic there, right? And then Malchus, external expression, we usually think of thought, speech, and action. Thought is the external expression of the intellect from a person's quality of thoughts. You can kind of tell what kind of thinker they are. Speech, as we just spoke out outside, we could use to manifest the whole stack, our preferences, what we want, our perspective, our values, our logistical considerations. And then behavior, obviously, is the most external, concrete form of external expression, rather. And the best indication of really, what we're into, what we're after, what we believe, and how we feel, and stuff like that. So that's kind of like a background of the 10 spheros, but now with that background and the next recordings, we could kind of take a more macro view of these spheros and how they operate at broad layers of self-expression, what they call the worlds, the olamos, and what that means practically. In sneak preview, it's not planets. I laugh because I can't believe what kind of nonsense I used to believe. I'm so thankful and grateful to God for breaking me out of that 5-year-old type Kabbalah and more into something more mature. Although, to be honest with you, I imagine that as time progresses, I'll be laughing at my quality of understanding today compared to what I understand then, God willing. And again, I'm just being totally transparent with you. I have not arrived. I have not drawn a line in the sand and said I've made it. I totally don't imagine that at all. Because like I said, I myself have to escalate to Benjamin just to give me the analog, so it's like here, maybe you're, relying on me to share something about the analogy, and I'm relying on Benjamin for the analog, and I'm sure he has his mentors who he relies on, wherever he is in his journey, in the journey, that he's undergoing. So even though I laugh about it now, I'm sure we'll all laugh together, in the future, looking back at this compared to how we've grown and developed, to that point, God willing, and even then it's infinite. There's no end, right? So we could just kind of try to progress like any area of life. Not to reduce it to that, but like we try to progress in any area of life, we're trying to grow together here. God willing. And then also we have to cover the partsufim, which people call personages, which to me means nothing. I'll be honest with you. It means absolutely nothing. And faces, I don't know, I think of the face I'm looking at right now when I'm doing the recording. I know what that means practically. And this channel and the community we're working to build together is practical Kabbalah. Not that hocus pocus mumbo jumbo, that you see online and all that many times. I mean by practical Kabbalah is applying the Kabbalah in the way that it was intended. Because Kabbalah comes from the word kibel, meaning to receive. Why, from where did we receive this knowledge? Ultimately from Moses, who got it from Sinai, where God revealed himself to Moses in front of the entire nation of Israel. We're dealing with millions of eyewitnesses who had a direct divine revelation in the same place at the same time, not through an angel, not through a prophetic vision, not through an angel. They literally heard God speak to them, like the 10 Commandments and stuff, which are the basic categories for all of the, unfortunately, what people call commandments. That's a gross oversimplification. Really, the word mitzvah doesn't mean commandment. It means, like the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, teaches us, and the Rebbe writes about this in his book Day by Day, Hayom Yom, which is translated in English, and it's available for a free download on Chabad.org, CHABAD.org. I would highly recommend it. It's like these little snippets almost, so to speak, but they're super powerful. Infinite spiritual power encapsulated in little, little teachings in quantity. But anyways, without going too far down that rabbit hole here, as they say in the business world. Yeah, now I kind of have to refresh my memory about where I was going with that. Yeah, faces and partsufim. So the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh talks about how mitzvah is related to tzavta, connection. We're connecting theory to practice. We're connecting an idea that God teaches us about in the Torah with the practice required, given that the language of the body is the language of experience. Here we are having this conversation as souls, as these spiritual beings, but acting through this physical interface or body. So God gives us the mitzvos. And that, by the way, ties back to my comment about the 7 mitzvos, the Sheva mitzvos for the Bnei Noach. It's called the Bnei Noach, which means the sons of Noah, because 6 out of 6 out of 7 were given to Adam. This is before like religion as we know it. There was only one, what, for lack of better words, what you would call religion. The 7th was given in the time of Noah. It was not to torture animals. And that came into play because before then we were vegans. And without going down the rabbit hole of why God gave us permission to eat animals as well in the time of Noah. But anyways, because of that, that's why we call it the 7 laws of Noah. And when God revealed himself to the entire nation of Israel directly with millions of eyewitnesses, which is the basis for Judaism as an FYI, he also reiterated the 7 laws of Noah for all nations, right? And he taught Moses, our teacher, peace be upon him, the deep secrets of Kabbalah, and they've been passed down from generation to generation till today. I just want to try to open up these ideas to a broader audience so more people could benefit from it. But when we say practical Kabbalah, that would actually include the mitzvahs. Those activities God says to do are custom designed as, so to speak, classroom activities, just like Benjamin would explain to me by way of analogy. A teacher gives classroom activities to help the students relate to the ideas that they learn about in the science book, or they learn about in the math book, or they read about in a story in English. God custom designs these sets of activities to provide us with the conceptual framework by means of hands-on experience to relate to these ideas we're learning about in Kabbalah practically and apply them in our day-to-day life. Just like anyone, they go to apply for a job, they have a PhD from Columbia and whatever in computer science, and the guy says, wow, a prestigious university, and a very impressive degree. So how many years have you been in the industry, and like what have you developed so far? Could I see some of your computer code online somewhere? Or the guy's like, what do you mean? I graduated last week. I don't have any experience. And the guy's like, yeah, thank you so much. Let me shake your hand. Thank you for your time. Best of luck to you. Maybe come back after you've worked a little bit in industry and gain some experience. They said, what are you talking about? I'm a genius and I have a very fancy degree. Who cares about experience? It's self-understood that we need to test our theory in practice to weed out intellectual dross or mistakes and really get a solid, actual, concrete, practical understanding of this stuff. That's why one reason why I called the YouTube channel and the school community Practical Kabbalah. But hopefully this was useful to you and more useful to you than all sorts of cryptic, nonsensical mumbo jumbo you read in books and heard in videos or whatever maybe saw on YouTube. And hopefully it will motivate you to like, to subscribe, to recommend our channel and our community to others, and to actively participate in building this together with me. Like I said, frankly, I don't think I could do it alone. I mean, I'm one person, but together with you and whoever you would recommend that you feel comfortable with, who would be open-minded to working with us on this. Again, the YouTube is free. The community is free. The only thing you have to invest is time. And like I said, we definitely welcome questions, comments, like anything I said. If you say like, hey, this part wasn't too clear, this part didn't seem too practical, I could use more examples, more analogies. What did you mean by this? Or what do you say about that? Like, again, like we have a mentor, and the more you ask, the more that I can ask Benjamin, and the more we can all get answered, which I'm super looking forward to. So please, by all means, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to continuing with you in the next video.